Welcome to our interview series from the Community of Practice for Global Health R&D, a joint initiative between the Global Health Center at the Geneva Graduate Institute and the United Efforts for Innovation, Access and Delivery. Today, we spotlight EspeRare Foundation, a not-for-profit organization based in Geneva, Switzerland, dedicated to developing treatments for rare diseases in children. EspeRare fills critical gaps by merging scientific expertise, patient advocacy, and collaborative partnerships to improve access for underserved patients. We spoke with Caroline Kant, Executive Director, and Sebastian Matsuri, Prenatal Platform Development Director, to learn about EspeRare's collaborative approach. Regulatory frameworks play an important role in making innovative treatments available and accessible to patients who need them. But navigating these pathways can be complex. In this video, Sebastian explains the challenges EspeRare faces in the regulatory space, the opportunities available for them, and how these frameworks influence progress in rare disease innovation.
I love talking about regulatory matters because very often it comes with a kind of implicit understanding that this is a hurdle, a cost, an annoyance, etc. And it's true that it's a necessary evil in drug development, but regulatory authorities are really here to fulfill a very essential function, which is to ensure that any complicated therapeutic product that is supposed to be prescribed to ill patients and even more vulnerable people needs to have proven efficacy and the highest safety possible. So the whole process is extremely helpful. And I would say first that a common theme that we have with other R&D global health organizations that are based in Geneva is that our primary goal is not necessarily to get a drug on market to commercialize it, but it's really to bring a transformative innovation that would bring new and unprecedented impact to patients and ideally to health systems. So that's really part of the mission. And access is another very important concept that if you have a registered drug that sits on the shelf, it is not as helpful as ones that can actually really be deployed and used by patients. One is, if you're developing drugs for very few patients and that there aren't so many available solutions, you can, under certain conditions, be granted orphan drug status by certain stringent regulatory authorities, which typically provide accelerated and enhanced consultation mechanisms with their experts, which is extremely valuable in terms of keeping in touch and having a helpful and constructive interaction with the regulators and their experts and their panel of reviewers during the drug development process. It sometimes also comes with incentives that can be of a financial nature and that can also provide that extra boost that would motivate non-profit but also commercial entities to get into an adventure of drug development that very often obviously is full of uncertainty and challenges. You can get years of market exclusivity, for example. You can get priority review vouchers. Is a mechanism specific to the American FDA, which is a significant financial incentive that is supposed to reward the development of drugs that are extremely useful in orphan type of populations or when there is absolutely no alternative treatment available. You can also get tax credits or fee reductions, etc. So that's a set of opportunities that, if used well, can really be a helpful booster to the drug development program, and that I think is something that we as EspeRare in the rare disease space share with other entities in global health. I will take the example of ER004, which is a flagship product that is hopefully soon going to get registered by the American FDA and hopefully then the EMA and others. It has the particularity of being a prenatal treatment. And essentially, there is not such thing as a prenatal pathway at the FDA or the EMA if you take, the two major stringent regulatory authorities. In fact, the pediatric period starts after birth. And so as a drug developer for this type of solution, we have to make do and navigate and adapt the existing frameworks and guidelines. And sometimes we have to build the aircraft as we're flying it together with the authorities to try and see what would be applicable and what not, given the specificities of developing drugs, specifically for the prenatal period. But there are also constraints which are here for good reasons, but are nevertheless a challenge to navigate. If I take the FDA as an example, pregnant women and fetuses are considered, for good or for bad, vulnerable. And therefore, if you want to experiment and do drug development in these categories of patients, you have to comply with a series of constraints. For example, you need to bring more evidence in prenatal animal models or in healthy individuals that you meet a certain level of safety requirement. And you even need to go postnatal before you go prenatal, which again, I'm not debating the validity, it's understandable, but it also has downsides. Like ER004 is a drug that will only work prenatally because it has been designed to address a shortcoming of the embryo of the organ generations, in that case, the skin. So administered postnatally, the efficacy data is essentially not demonstrating any benefit. But also doing all these steps takes time, it takes money, it can act as a disincentive for commercial partners to engage if they see a long timeline or an extremely expensive development program before you can actually hit the development in the category of patients that you are ultimately targeting. And there is also another aspect, which is that the risk-benefit consideration, which really is at the core of what authorities are considering when they are overseeing development and registration of innovative products. Typically, they look at the benefit and the risk for an individual, which is the one that gets treated. And oftentimes in innovation in our space, the definition of risk and benefit, and especially of benefit, can be a little bit broader and a little bit also diluted in time. You create a lot of future benefits for the life of, in that case, a fetus who will become a child and hopefully an adult, etc. You will also actually generate common knowledge that will benefit an entire category of patients and, other patients with rare diseases that will come after those patients who are enrolled in the clinical studies. So I'm not saying that you should relax the necessity of really establishing safety and efficacy, but those constraints also create actually some rigid guidelines and frameworks that are sometimes difficult to accommodate as a drug developer, especially when you're working in diseases that are not very well funded. Another example is the fact that rare diseases, as the name indicates, are rare. If you add all the rare diseases, you get to pretty frequent conditions, but each individual disease is rare. And so you're not going to run a randomized controlled trial with 2,000 patients. First, ethically, you cannot not treat a patient that has the disease if there is really no other option. And also you need to understand how you will be able to calculate the statistics and use the data to demonstrate efficacy and safety on small niche cohorts of patients, which is not always easy to do, and essentially forces us to get to some alternative ways of working, looking at natural history instead of doing two-arm clinical trials, and also looking at patient-reported outcomes. And those are things that are not necessarily common practice within the stringent regulatory authorities. So you need to have a constant dialogue to try and really evolve the practices and what would be authorized or not. I will just end by saying that in our experience and past interactions, the authorities have been typically very open, very welcoming to engage and to have an exchange. And all things considered, relatively flexible too, to try and consider what their established guidelines and policies are and what is feasible to essentially flirt with the boundaries of these guidelines in order to make sure that there is a chance for these transformative innovations to still be developed and ultimately reach patients.